Morning, everybody.
और तुम लोग
बढ़िया बढ़िया फर्स्ट क्लास. गुड इवनिंग सर.
Good evening.
Tofan Pati Saab, good evening.
Good evening.
You have made
Doctor-
people addicted to this. Tofan Pati Saab.
Yeah. So you are not in Kolkata?
Mysore.
Hmm.
Tonight, early morning, 4 o'clock flight to Kolkata.
4 flight to Kolkata.
Hmm.
So you'll come to airport, leave home at 2 o'clock. Huh? Yeah,
I'll be leaving by around 11:30.
Radhika, would you like to test your slides?
sure. Just 1 minute.
Quite feasible.
ठीक है. आ रहा है.
आ रहा है?
हाँ, उसको अनशेयर कर देना. या थैंक यू. सर आप कलकत्ता आ गए?
हम सब तो कोलकाता में है.
ओके, मैं कल सुबह पहुंच रहा हूँ सर.
कितना बजे आ रहे हो?
मेरे ख्याल से अराउंड 9 or 10 AM.
वेलकम.
या
Many of our people are in Kolkata.
या
I have talked to Dr. I had already written a letter. I have talked to Dr. Norman Sartorius. He is coming
ओके.
very shortly. Dinesh Bhugra will also come.
हाँ, on this platform.
On this platform, yes, I was discussing with him that he was earlier. He want to speak on other issue,
ओके.
new perspectives. And we'll have a list also.
राधिका भी क्या टाइम हो रहा है उधर?
12:31.
ओके ओके, तो फिर आधी रात हो गया.
हाँ.
And that happened when we had invited Helen Arlen, you remember?
हाँ.
You were moderator in that seminar.
Which one, sir?
Schizophrenia seminar which we held.
Yeah.
Around 1,500 participants. First to be there. She was there. And you were one of the invited moderators. Vinay was there also.
Okay.
Do you remember that? For us, it was not midnight. For her, it was midnight. Late past midnight.
Okay.
So that will happen to Radhika today.
Yes, it is. I put the alarms on, not 1, 2.
नहीं, थैंक यू सो मच. आप रात को उठ के
No
हम लोग
problem.
के लिए कष्ट कर रहे हैं इतना.
नहीं. I want to thank you all for the opportunity.
We'll start.
स्टार्ट करेंगे. इंट्रोडक्शन
स्टार्ट कर देते हैं. कोई नक होगा तो मैं इनविजिबल हो जाऊंगा, लेकिन रहूंगा.
श्योर.
invisible and silent हो जाऊंगा 2 मिनट ना हो सकता है
Okay. Okay. Amrit का actually workshop चल रहा है, तो he is in the meeting. He will unmute after I think 15 minutes.
he's there
Amrit, welcome. Workshop हो गया? चल रहा है ठीक है, चल रहा है. Got it.
Multitasking.
चलो, we can start now, sir.
yes let's we should start now
Yeah, already 70 people are there. So Shreya, can we have the slides? Yeah, thank you. So once again, a very warm good evening, 137th good evening to all of you. Today we'll be talking about strength-based perspective of autism. The speaker is from Australia, and she is up in the night for us. Thank you, speaker, for being with us. Next slide, please. I'm handing over the session to Tufan sir. Professor Dr. Tufan Pati sir is the chairman of the program. Sir, over to you. I'm not reading your slide. You could return the favor to us.
Mute. Good evening, everybody. I shall return the favor because that is not so much important. Dr. Alim Siddiqui and Dr. Amrit Patidoshi, our moderators, are well known, vibrant, and they're visible even if they're not there. So I welcome our vibrant moderators, Dr. Alim Siddiqui, Treasurer of IPS, and Dr. Amrit Patidoshi, President of IPS, Odisha State Branch and Secretary, Eastern Zonal Branch, as moderators. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next, please. Our chairperson is Dr. Amir Krishna Sahu from Bhubaneswar. He is Assistant Professor, PG Department of Psychiatry, IMS and Shama Hospital, Bhubaneswar, and completed MES from MKCG Medical College in 2009, completed MD from CIP Ranchi 2016, Senior Resident in Child and Adolescent Psychiatry from CIP Ranchi. He has got 3 national publications. Welcome, Amir. Nice to see you over here. Next slide, please. Dr. Ravikant Tangala from Hyderabad, MBBS from Osmania Medical College, MD from SBS Medical College, DNB NB 2015, DM in Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, PAMH Chandigarh. Current place of work and designation, Consultant Child and Adolescent Psychiatrist at Dr. Ravi's Child Guidance Clinics, Madhapur and Banastaripuram. Director of Little Wings Child Development Center, IAP Society, Madhapur. Visiting Consultant to Paramita and Ankura Hospital, Selvi Nagar. Little Stars Neurodevelopment Clinic, Kundapur, Canada Child Development Center, Madhapur, Nice Hospital, Lake Ripple, all over there, he is there as consultant. Brickwork experience till date. Work as senior resident in Institute of Mental Health, Hyderabad, Asa Hospital, Malla Reddy Medical College and PGMER. Currently running 2 exclusive child psychiatric clinics and a child development center in Hyderabad, catering to various mental health disorders and neurodevelopment disorders like autism and ADHD, etc. Welcome, Dr. Ravikant, and welcome, Dr. Amir. The meeting now belongs to you. Please take over and carry on the further proceedings. One of the chairpersons will introduce our speaker, and the other chair will introduce the topic. Over to you. I am muted.
So may I? Dr.
Dr.
Ravikant.
Ravikant, welcome. I think Mia is not yet joined, so you have to take over.
Yeah. So warm welcome to everyone and good evening. So it's my pleasure to chair today's session, and thanks to Dr. Amrit Patidoshi and Dr. Tufan Pati and Dr. Alim and my dear friend Dr. Idris, who has invited me to chair this important session on this important topic. And so today I would like to introduce Dr. Radhika Tanksale from Australia. And she's a clinical psychologist, director and founder, Social Space Community. She has worked for 15 years in the area of autism. She is based in Brisbane, Australia for the last 13 years. She aims to share a strength-based understanding of autism. She is an alumnus of Central Institute of Psychiatry, Kanke, and completed her doctoral research at University of Queensland in 2021. Her research evaluated a yoga-based program incorporating third wave CBT components developed by her for children on autism spectrum between 8 to 12 years and the program's effect on self-regulation. She recognized the importance of social connections and a sense of belonging on psychosocial well-being and started Social Space Community. The Social Space Community provides social and recreational workshops for neurodivergent young individuals and their families. Through these various workshops, the aim is to support social and community participation and facilitate positive social connections. So with this, I would like to invite Dr. Radhika to start the topic. And this topic is very important because it's very unique. It's a very new perspective, which we have to understand this lens of understanding strength-based, because we always talk about the deficit-based thinking. Our whole thinking is about deficits. Even the DSM criteria talks about deficits. But here we have a very new and new school of thought which we should understand. And I would not take more longer to continue the session. So Dr. Radhika, please take over.
Yeah, please unmute.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you, Tufan, Pati, sir, Alim, Amrit, and everyone for giving me this opportunity. But I'd really like to thank Rucha for organizing this. So thanks, Rucha. So I will start sharing now. So yes, I'm going to talk about a strength-based perspective of autism, and I am going to start. This is a schedule. So what I'll do is first I'll have some pre-reflection questions. Can everyone hear me? Aline, you can hear me, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'm able to hear you.
Okay. So we'll start with pre-reflection questions. Then I'll talk about a strengths-based approach in understanding autism. Then a little bit around acceptance versus awareness. You know, what is the difference? How we can have a more collective approach. There are lots of associated difficulties. I think if you attended Indu's presentation last week, she had this slide where there are lots of associated difficulties with autism. But I'm going to focus on three main ones: anxiety, executive functioning, and alexithymia. Where I'll talk about gender differences, mainly male-female phenotype, and masking and camouflaging, demand avoidance profile, which you all might have heard. There's a lot of talk around pathological demand avoidance, but I prefer to call it demand avoidance profile. The difference between meltdowns and tantrums, burnout and shutdowns, attachment difficulties versus autism, and just some resources, and then I'll give you the questions again. So what I'll do is I'll ask you all to just take maybe 2 minutes and just go through these questions, everyone. You don't have to write notes, but just kind of a reflection for you. So at the end, when I ask you the question, it's just that, did I get anything from here? Or was it similar to what I'm already doing? Or, you know, was there something more that's added on to my knowledge base? So acceptance versus awareness, you know, what is your understanding of these two terms? Any gender differences in autism that you have noted in your own clinical work, like when, you know, when I talk about, you know, boys versus girls, and when they walk into your clinical practice, what do you notice? Have you made some mental notes there? What is the difference between meltdowns and tantrums, and how do the management differ? And anxiety and the role it plays in autism presentation. So I'll just give a couple of minutes to just have a think about these questions before we dive in.
So should we ask people to type in their responses?
No, just think about it.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll continue. Now, the reason why I really want to I'm so passionate about giving this newer strength-based perspective on autism is one, that we have to understand that the world has really, become narrow, and especially since COVID. Like, I'm sitting here in Brisbane and you all are watching me from India, things have just kind of globally, things have opened up. So the information, the knowledge, the opportunities, many of you may go and present internationally. Many of you may do research publications in international journals. Many of you, may kind of maybe join in or collaborate with some research teams internationally. So there is a growing awareness and acceptance of a different way of understanding autism. And I think the more we are basically at par with whatever information is there, we need to kind of try to keep building that knowledge base. The other thing is that we know that knowledge leads to attitude change, and more the right knowledge we have. So, once I have that right knowledge, then I'm going to, there's so much on social media, there is so much there on internet, that I want to make sure that what I read now is the right information that's kind of mapping onto what I know, what helps for autistic individuals to develop a positive sense of identity and express their true authentic self. And with this knowledge, then we're able to create an attitude change, a positive attitude change. So when a parent or a caregiver or an individual on the autism spectrum comes into the clinic, now when you give the diagnosis, they're not leaving the clinic with this doom gloom kind of a scenario. It's like, oh, I'm autistic. Rather, we want them to go out of the clinic thinking, okay, this explains who I am. This explains my journey, or this explains as a parent what my child is going through. But there is so much out there that I can do. And I'm now put in touch with all the right resources, tools, therapy, management. And that then for parents or individuals can lead to the sense of advocacy, that I can advocate for myself. There is that self-determination, there is that self-advocacy theory that's been there, which then leads to inclusion. We want to bring in more inclusion for autistic individuals. And it's not just about, autistic individuals trying to fit into this neurotypical world. Rather, we start to think, or neurotypicals also start to think of how we can create an environmental change to accommodate some of the difficulties or to support autistic individuals. Say, for example, if we know that we have an autistic client coming into the clinic, where they love predictability, they love routine, they love a set time, you can't keep them waiting in the waiting room for a long time. Rather, you will probably see them first thing in the morning, so that, they know that when I reach there, there are less people there, there's less sensory overwhelm, and I go and see my doctor or my therapist or my allied health professional, and that can help them more. So it's just about making those little changes. And so autism, I found this very beautiful quote by Stuart Duncan, who's a father of an autistic son. And he says that autism is not a choice, but acceptance is. And imagine if the opposite were true. And the difference between awareness and acceptance is this. And I found this on social media, on Instagram. This was like this month, which was really beautiful, by Young Indians Kolkata. And basically they describe the difference between awareness and acceptance so beautifully. That awareness is that we know that autism exists. We know that I can identify it. We know that something is happening. It means that you can, you kind of talk about it, but it's not enough, right? Because you're not connecting personally. Acceptance is when you kind of do that hard work, when you work with the autistic individuals to understand what is it that will help them. What is it, without judgment, what is the support that we can offer? How can we gain more understanding of what's going on for you? And then bringing in those inclusive practices, really trying hard to create a more, to kind of accommodate, to kind of create environmental changes to support the autistic people. So autism, the way I see it is, autism is a different way of thinking, perceiving, sensing, and relating to the world. Now, when I say the difference between perceiving and sensing is, perception is, of course, our different senses are looking, or maybe touch, see, smell. But sensing is sensations. or what I feel within my body, that introspective awareness. And we know that in autism, that is something that they really struggle with. So it is a neurological difference. And like Ravikant sir said, that all, unfortunately, DSM-5, they talk about disorders. It's still, it's that deficit-based model. And for purpose of funding or for purpose of verification, we do have to write ASD. But I feel that we have to understand that it is not a disorder, it's not a deficit, it's just a neurological difference. And in what is happening right now is, instead of using just the word autistic, like, and Indu had in her slide, like she was like, we have autistic, we have ADHD, we have dyslexia, and often you will see that they go together hand in hand. So now we say neurodivergent, so versus neurotypicals or non-autistic. So when we say, so autism, I think sometimes you hear they'll say, oh, it's not a disease model, bimari nahi hai, but it's just a difference. Nature mein difference hai. Like, I was presenting a little while ago, and Alka ma'am so beautifully, she said, just like in nature, there is diversity. And since then I've been using it, that there is acceptance, there are roses, there is lavender, but you just accept for what it is. In people, we know there is cultural diversity, there's language diversity. But and we also understand, and there was this book that I used to read with my autistic children when I wanted to share the diagnosis with them, is there was this book around the Windows operating system and the Mac. And they're just different operating systems, but it's not that one is better than the other. But they are just different way of doing the same thing. So, now we need to start recognizing this neurological diversity. The other thing is that in autism, first there used to be this puzzle pieces, but they don't use puzzle pieces anymore. And puzzle pieces was that it came from this organization which looked at autism as a puzzling, mysterious thing, but in a very, had a very negative connotation. So now there is the use of infinity symbol. You can use person first language, that is person on the autism spectrum, or identity first language, autistic child or neurodivergent child, teen, adult, individual. And I think the most important thing for me, which recently when I saw this Instagram, this post, is that autism is a spectrum. But for me, it was always this linear spectrum. It was only when I realized, oh, but we don't say high function, we don't say low function, we don't say severe, we don't say mild. And yet I always have this linear view. And it was only when I looked at this, I went, oh, isn't that amazing that autism is not this linear view. We are both autistic, but we have different strengths and difficulties. And so it's more like this, circle and this like pizza slices, but each one can have difficulties and strengths, and there's variability. So it's not saying that, oh, this person, it's not a quantitative difference. It's more, more or in quantity, more in strengths and difficulties, but not really qualitative. Right, so an autistic individual, the core deficit, the core difficulty, will be same. So in autism, we talk about, we all know in the DSM diagnostic criteria, the first part is the social emotional or the communication, social emotional reciprocity. And the second part is around repetitive behaviors, sensory sensitivities, predictability, transitioning, and those are the second part, the criterion B of DSM-5. When I talk about criterion A, one thing is like DSM has captured this very beautifully, is social emotional reciprocity. And we have to understand that no communication is without emotion. There is emotion in everything that we communicate, except maybe when there are rules like a stop sign or a sign says U-turns prohibited or things like that. But usually all communication has some emotional component in it. And say for example, like even and communication doesn't have to be just words, it could be even non-verbal communication. It could like even my voice, the prosody, it can be texting, typing. And like now when when we're on WhatsApp, now people don't even write words, it's using emojis. But emojis are basically a way to communicate emotions. It's a way to tell the other person that I hear you. And there are so many emojis. And it's not just now that the emojis are not just, they could have just been 6 emojis, but now there are so many, and it's like, wow, this really kind of captures what I'm feeling right now. And if
Radhika,
that was, yes,
there is a request to go a
Yes.
bit slow.
okay.
Speak a bit slow.
I'm so worried
Yes.
that I will not finish on time. Okay, I'll speak
No,
slow.
no, we don't have so much lack of time. You go in a
Okay,
relaxed
okay.
space.
Sorry, everyone. So, what I wanted to say कि इमोशन जो है वो कम्युनिकेशन का एक पार्ट है, और हम लोग सब कहीं ना कहीं इमोशन यूज करते हैं. एंड पहले तो हम लोग इमोजीज सिर्फ थोड़े से होते थे, अब तो मूविंग इमोजीज है, अब
Yeah,
जिप्स हैं.
actually,
तो
once more. Non-Hindi speaking audience is also there, so we'll
Okay.
stick to English only.
stay in English only. Okay.
Yeah. But a bit
So,
slow.
Okay. It's like a train. Okay. And we are so when I say social emotional communication, this needs to be considered. The second thing that we see in autism, which is a sensory motor or the criterion B in DSM-5, we all know that sensory sensitivities or hyper or hyposensitivity to maybe auditory or tactile or visual or smells. There are repetitive motor behaviors, but not just, when I say repetitive motor behaviors, it's not just hand movements or physical movements, but it's also words, it's also phrases, it's also language. There is this insistence on routine, there is this insistence on predictability. And if you look at criterion B, it is very much dominated by anxiety. Higher the anxiety, higher your sensory sensitivities. Higher the anxiety, more the repetitive behaviors, more stimming. Higher the anxiety, more repetitive questioning, difficulty in transitioning. What you're trying to do is you're trying to exert control when you're feeling anxious. Now, it can also be an excitatory. If you're very excited, then, the sensory motor, again, the same thing. More excited you are, the child is going to be constantly pacing around, very excited to go to, maybe when Papa comes, I'll go and he'll go on a ride on the scooter. And so he'll keep checking the time, he'll keep pacing up and down, and there'll be maybe, jumping around. So either when there is higher, whether it's excitement or whether it's anxiety, you will see an increase in the sensory motor behaviors. And that will affect the social emotional reciprocity as well. So in autism, we know that there are lots of associated difficulties, but I'm going to focus on 3. I'm going to focus on alexithymia. I'm going to focus on, which also feeds into emotion management. I'm going to focus on executive functioning, again, which is related to emotion management. And I'm going to focus on anxiety, right? So these 3 things, and we know that all these associated difficulties in autism contribute to self-regulatory, can somehow affect self-regulatory competence. And ultimately management, ultimately therapy works on, supporting self-regulation, okay? So self-regulation is, you have to understand that there are 4 components for self-regulation. 1 is your thoughts. 2nd is your emotions. 3rd is your attention. And 4th is your actions and behavior. Thoughts are nothing but, we're talking about here in terms of self-regulation, is that executive functioning skills, ability to shift set, ability to plan, to organize. Autistic individuals are really good at long-term memory recall. And, if there is, but when it comes to sequential, everyday managing or, going, working through everyday tasks, the parents still have to say, have you packed your bag? Have you put your lunchbox in? Have you worn your shoes? So things like that. There has to be a lot of support. The parents literally have to sometimes be the executive brain of the child, and or this executive secretary or the secretary, and help the child navigate. And it also is about impulse control. And impulse control is my ability to manage that goal or reach that goal, but without letting distractions or without inhibiting maybe certain responses to reach that goal, right? Then we talk about emotions. Emotion regulation is a top-down skill, and it is about responding to the stressors and not reacting to it. And what we mean by reaction is when it is something where I'm not able to exert control on whatever unhelpful emotions I'm having right now. Then we talk about attention, and attention is focused attention. If I have something in mind, if there's something that's really, it's going on in my mind right now, to park that for a while, focus on what the activity, sustain attention of what the teacher is telling me, or what my parent is telling me, or what my boss is telling me. And then the action is kind of goal-directed behavior towards the task, kind of follows. Now, but we also have to remember that emotion is not just a top-down process. That emotion is also a physiological process. So there's a bottom-up approach that we need to consider as well. And when we talk about, and I'll come back to it, but when we talk about emotional communication, we know that one of the difficulties that autistic individuals have is alexithymia, or the inability to communicate emotions and the inability to how I am feeling. Often when we do an ADOS and you ask, a person on the autism spectrum, what makes you feel sad? What makes you feel happy? What makes you feel upset? Can you tell me a time when you were upset? How upset were you? And often the response may be, I don't know. And it's not just I don't know, but sometimes it is, I don't have the words to tell you exactly what I feel for you to make sense of what I experience. And so in autism, one of the big things that I guess when we focus on is trying to, and if someone comes into your clinic, you're really trying to see what is that range of emotional vocabulary? What can the person present with? Is the person, basic emotions, I think, sad, happy, angry, worried. But is there more? Say, for example, we don't just say, I'm so happy, or that was so amazing, that was awesome, I had so much fun, I was thrilled, I was excited. So there's so many words to describe just one emotion. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to build this emotional vocabulary slowly and then make this emotional library. The more we extend that emotional library, the better we can name our feelings, the better we can work through it. So I don't know if you know the work of Dr. Dan Siegel, but Dan Siegel uses this phrase, name it to tame it. That is, if I can name my feelings, the minute I name my feeling, I come into my prefrontal. I am able now, the limbic system, if you know the handy model of the brain, and this is what Dr. Dan Siegel says, this is your limbic system, this is your prefrontal or your thinking prefrontal. And sometimes when when the emotional dysregulation is experienced, the limbic system starts to activate and you flip the lid. That is, the prefrontal goes offline and now the amygdala is activated, the limbic system is activated. And what you're trying to do is, one of the ways, if you name it, if you can just become aware of what I'm feeling and I name that feeling, then you're starting to slowly bring your thinking brain or your upstairs brain online. Okay, so this is one of the things I wanted to share. And I also wanted to share that the polyvagal lens and polyvagal theory has changed my perception on understanding autism. And if you read Dr. Stephen Porges' work, you will understand this, but I won't go in detail. But what I want to say is that we all know about vagus nerve and how vagus nerve functions when it comes to the rest and digest, or it helps us to feel calm. Now we know that the vagus nerve has two parts. One is your dorsal vagal, and dorsal vagal is your rest and digest, or what we commonly know as, oh, when I feel calm, that is your parasympathetic. But there's another part of parasympathetic, and in the dorsal vagal, when the dorsal vagal is, how would you say, when you're not in the rest and digest state, but when the dorsal vagal is activated due to a threat response, immobilization happens or freeze response happens. The other part of parasympathetic nervous system is your ventral vagal, which is your autonomically governed social engagement system. When I am feeling safe, when my anxiety is low, when I'm not feeling threatened, I am going to engage, I am going to connect with others. Yeah? And in that part of that autonomic nervous system, we have the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight. So all three of them cannot happen together. It's a hierarchical model. So if my ventral vagal is on, my social engagement system is on, I am connecting to everyone around the room. If I feel there is threat, there is anxiety, and my body has perceived that I'm not feeling safe, my sympathetic system turns on and I go into fight or flight or mobilization. So often, we'll see when an autistic person has, a meltdown, is having a burnout, the fight or flight system, it kind of takes over and they feel mobilized. And then you see that there is a lot of, maybe self-harming or, throwing objects or whatever it is, but you'll see an escalation in behavior. You're avoiding, you're running away from there. And if then that doesn't support my system, now I've tried this and it's just not working, I'm still feeling very anxious and I cannot cope sometimes, then the dorsal vagal turns on, which is your freeze response, right? So it's a hierarchical model and anxiety. And the thing is that often what we work with is we work on externalization. If there's externalization, we're like, yes, I know what to do. This child is agitated. This child is maybe very excited. And of course, we give resources like maybe some sensory tools or something. But often there is an internalization process where there is that anxiety, but an autistic individual may not overtly present that anxiety, but they are experiencing this threat response, this constant space of, but I'm socially confused. I really don't understand what's happening. What am I supposed to say? Am I perfect? Am I making a mistake? Is this right? Is this wrong? I'm reading your facial expressions, but I'm trying to understand, what are you trying to convey? So there's so much going on. Remember one thing, for an autistic individual, they are not just, if you talk about a child or if you talk about an adult or a teen, it's not just the academic or the work curriculum that they have to learn. It is the academic, the sensory, the social, the emotional. We are talking about different curriculums, and this is about adjusting in a world created by neurotypicals for neurotypicals, right? And so understanding that there are a lot of internalizing behaviors, there is a lot of understanding that we need to work with the sympathetic nervous system and finding those cues. What is happening? What is giving me those cues to say, this person is feeling anxious right now? And higher the anxiety, higher your sensory sensitivities, higher the rigidity, higher the inflexibility in thinking, higher difficulty in transitioning, and, the more control and predictability on routine. So I am going to show 2 videos to kind of talk about gender differences. And I'm going to stop screen share and So I want to talk about gender difference and predominantly why autistic girls are underdiagnosed. Now I'm sharing this video with Tony Atwood. Tony Atwood is my, I've worked with him for almost 11 years and has been my teacher, and I've learned so much from him. And he has this, strength. You can understand when you listen to his video how he talks about autism in a very strength-based manner. So I'm going to show this video to everyone, but I think first I have to share sound. Will it be under sharing sound? Okay.
We're only just discovering how to adapt to autism. And we find that boys and girls have the same core characteristics, but may adapt to it in a different way. And one of the ways that the girls will adapt is realize, I'm not good at socializing, but I like socializing and I want to learn, so I'll watch. Don't want to make a mistake, don't want to be seen making an error, and I'll observe people.
It is not audible.
People can't hear?
Yeah, it is not audible.
Why? Wait, let me see.
It's low volume.
Just 1 minute. Okay, let's try again. Sorry, everyone.
We're only just discovering how to adapt to autism.
Is it audible?
Yes, ma'am, it is audible now. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we find that boys and girls have the same core characteristics, but may adapt to it in a different way. And one of the ways that the girls will adapt is realize, I'm not good at socializing, but I like socializing and I want to learn, so I'll watch. Don't want to make a mistake, don't want to be seen making an error, and I'll observe people. I will analyze them. I will copy them. I will create a mask. I will fake it till I make it, to such an extent that the teacher has no idea of the amount of mental effort that goes into socializing. The effort and energy is phenomenal, and it's suppressed in terms of agitation and released at home. So parents see almost a different character, what I call Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So often the girls, I would say, are more creative and intelligent in how they accommodate autism by learning, often by personal experience, how to socialize.
There's another video.
In Italy, Tony Atwood here in Brisbane.
Sorry. This is the wrong video. Sorry, everyone. Sorry. Just 1 minute.
Identify who's popular and think, I would. What an autistic girl is likely to do is identify who's popular and think, I would like to be popular. What do they do? How do they use their gestures? What do they talk about? What do they wear? And so the autistic girl becomes a psychologist and analyzes people, personality, social behavior, and so on. And so what she's doing is choosing someone as a guide, in a way, of how to be and become that person. It's acting. It's acting neurotypical. It is a brief cure for autism. But my concern as a clinician is that is at horrendous cost. Considering autistic boys, their adaptation can be total withdrawal, become isolated, not engage with others, it's safe. And some, unfortunately, in teenage years, become a recluse in their bedroom, it's safe. But when they engage socially, they make mistakes. And unfortunately, their reaction can be agitation, anger, and unfortunately be quite abrasive to others. One of the things that the girls will do is avidly apologize. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, and want everyone to be happy. To a fault, to a certain extent. But the boys will try to socialize. It doesn't work, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And the fault is in other people, not me. So they can go into attack mode. A characteristic of autism is something fascinates you. Now, it can be what everyone else is interested in, Pokemon, Minecraft and things like that, but you take it to a degree far greater than anyone else. Or it's unusual. It is something obscure. It may be a particular insect, or should we say, in a science museum, a particular animal that is now, what is the phrase, extinct. And you know all about it, and you're an encyclopedia of knowledge on that. But I have found that there is a diversity in girls' interests that includes the arts, to draw in photographic realism, have a wonderful sense of perception, to sing in perfect pitch. What we now find is that in autism there's a difficulty in expressing your thoughts and feelings through speech. How you're feeling, I don't know, but can do that magnificently and eloquently in the arts. And some will go on to a career in the arts, in playing an instrument, in singing, in fine art, etc. And we're recognizing that this is not only a talent with lots of practice, but is a way of describing the self and getting genuine praise from others. But there are other interests too, especially for the girls, in animals, in horses, for example, and dogs, and have a career as a wildlife ranger and so on. So it could be in animals. It can be sometimes with words and literature. And one of the things that the girls may have done is, I'm different, I'm not accepted, so I'll escape into my imagination. I will read fiction. Boys often find fiction boring, but the girls will say, oh, Harry Potter, I identify with Hermione. I like fiction. And so write fiction and become a very successful author. So when we're looking at careers for an autistic girl, we don't say engineering or accountancy. It can be the arts, and that is very enjoyable and valuable.
I am so sorry. I don't know why. So sorry. I don't know why when I pause it, it's still. Give me 1 minute, everyone. I realized that I've missed one slide, and I wanted to talk about it, but I might come back to it later. So share screen again. And so when we understand gender difference, and the slide that I missed out, I might have to bring it up again. I don't know where it's gone. But this slide was really around one of the things that Tony Atwood and Carol Gray have done is that they have put in a strength-based understanding of the DSM-5 criteria. And I will bring that slide up maybe at the end because I don't know where that slide has gone. But we'll continue talking about gender differences. So as you noted, girls on the autism spectrum or women on the autism spectrum, either they're underdiagnosed, and we know that the rate of it's 4:1 is the ratio, so 4 males to 1 female. But they feel that maybe it's because of the underdiagnosis that we're missing out on many girls on the autism spectrum. And often women on the autism spectrum get diagnosed late. And when they do, they probably had several other diagnoses that have gone through, like maybe BPD, schizoaffective, bipolar, depression, anxiety, before finally, someone says, oh, maybe this developmental history or neurodevelopmental history that we have, it's suggestive of an autism, that you have autism. And I think that just kind of starts to help them understand that this is what explains who I am. There is also this thing for internalizing behavior, some kind of trying to hold back whatever is happening. Anxiety is really crippling me. Anxiety, when I'm internalizing anxiety, I'm kind of, oh, I might just be socially shy, I'm just anxious, or maybe she doesn't speak so much. Or autistic girls, but they probably would like to do is they like to stay on the social periphery. And often when I worked with girls and women on the autism spectrum, that is what they would explain, that they would stay on the social periphery. They wouldn't really join in. And it's like, well, I don't want to be noticed, but I'm here. So while they're fleeting from their, if you ask the parent or the teacher, especially teachers like, yeah, she plays around, there are so many kids at school and she's constantly with someone. She's with someone, but is she joining in? Is there that social emotional reciprocity? The interests are very similar as typical peers, just as Tony Atwood talked about, so the interests are like, maybe it could be Pokemon, maybe it could be Minecraft, maybe it could be Barbie dolls, maybe it could be LOL dolls, maybe it is, whatever the current interests are, they'll have similar interests. But what I've noticed when I used to work with, kids, and one of the things that parents would say is, yes, she has all the dolls. And all the dolls have a name, and all the dolls have, she remembers exactly when which doll was, was purchased. They're all lying there. But if she does play with the dolls, then it's more about rehearsing the social situations, rehearsing the social confusion that is happening around her. Or it's more around, I take out the dolls, I place them together, but that's all I do, But I know so much about the dolls. I know exactly which edition it is. I know exactly when it was, made, where it was made. And so the interests are very similar. But again, that, imaginary play, that it's not that they don't have imagination, but when it comes to play, they may not try to play the way neurotypical players are playing. And often there's another thing that I see, that when kids are internalizing, because they've had so much maybe rejection from peers, maybe there is always this feeling of that, what if I'm not accepted, because of that social anxiety. What we often see is that girls may also escape into imagination, and they may have an imaginary friend. And that imaginary friend is someone that is someone they can have a chat with, or there is someone there with them, or there is social motivation. So girls are socially motivated, but again, it's this, we'll talk more about masking and camouflaging, which will explain more the underdiagnoses. So Professor William Mandy, so he works in the University College of London, and his work is a lot around the female autism phenotype. And he gave this definition, and he talks about that autism is a relatively common neurodevelopmental condition with a gender-specific presentation. So this is what he's brought now, usually associated with normal range IQ, that represents a form of natural human variation, bringing both challenges and strengths. So he is not just, it is more common now that we are starting to understand spectrum. With the genders, there is a gender specific presentation. And maybe we need to kind of start to, when we, when we do that whole developmental history, and usually parents will tell you, I think listening to the parents really helps, because parents will know that my daughter is not, yes, she is with friends. Yes, she is at school. She's most well behaved. The teachers like, there are no issues, but there is something. And I think just maybe teasing that out can help. So one of the things that we notice for girls and women on the autism spectrum and is camouflaging. But camouflaging comes at a cost. And camouflaging, there are two types. So one is masking, and masking is nothing but changing that persona to hide the autistic traits, to fit in, to kind of present to others that I am, I try to kind of, as Tony said, you copy what other girls are doing, how they dress, how they talk, how they do their hair, and then I try to fit in, or I do compensation, which is using detailed strategies to manage my difficulties. So say, for example, what can I do now? So I may, sit down and say, okay, so maybe there are sometimes you might have to be put in a joke, where someone else is laughing, I laugh in as well, and things like that. But I'm going to try so much to manage these difficulties, so that I'm going to kind of, like you said, I'm going to do a research so that I can now fit in with my neurotypical peers. But this comes as a cost, because this is something that is exhausting. Like I said, you're not only managing the sensory, academic, social, emotional curriculum, but now you're also trying to be who you are not. And I think not being your authentic self, trying to present like someone else, is obviously going to come, is going to create a lot of, how do you say, sometimes it's going to create that, not just flight, but also the freeze response. This is another thing that we want to, and I forgot to mention that Julia Cook, so she is now doing her PhD with me under Professor William Mandy. She is my friend. I used to work with her. And she has written this article called Self-Reported Camouflaging Behaviors Used by Autistic Adults During Everyday Social Interactions. It is a wonderful article. Please read it, because it really takes you, they have broken down camouflaging behaviors into 38 camouflaging behaviors. So it's not just masking, but now it's innocuous engagement. There is active self-presentation, reciprocal social behaviors, risky social behaviors. So, this is a very beautifully done study. So please have a read. I also want to talk about the demand avoidance profile, or the pathological demand avoidance profile. Like I said, I don't use the word pathological, but Elizabeth Nielsen in 1970, she talked about this. And she said that there is this emerging pattern of behavior that she started to notice in children, where they go into extremes to ignore or avoid anything that they perceive as demand. And what she meant by that was that, and it was almost, it's like, and it's a, it came under the pervasive developmental disorders back then. And she was kind of trying to say, yes, that there are some autistic children who will display demand avoidance profile. And it could be simple thing as, can you feed the cat? Or, can you fill the water bottle? Or can you get a plate? And the answer is no. It's not an oppositional defiance disorder. It's not like they can't do it. It's not like, if they want to independently, yes, I can go and get a plate. If I want to feed the cat, I will feed the cat. But it is anxiety driven. It is that sense of, I am losing control and someone else is telling me what to do. And that anxiety is so high. They're constantly in that fight, flight, fight, flight. So every time there is a demand, it's seen as my freedom, And again, remember one thing, the sympathetic nervous system, it's not something that, how should I say this? But it's not something that is governed by, oh, mom has asked me to do something, so now I'm going to say no and therefore activate my sympathetic nervous system. It's the other way around. My sympathetic nervous system is so dysregulated right now that anything that is being said to me, I can't do it. And of course, we know that 80% of the vagus nerve information is afferent and only 20% is top down. So if I'm receiving this 80% of information saying, I cannot cope right now, then of course, what is happening is I'm just going to avoid it. So that avoidance, fight, flight. And we're talking about the flight behavior here. And often what we see is that for, children who display demand avoidance profile, and of course, you'll see other, autistic co-symptoms as well. But it is not, you cannot use rewards. You cannot use external motivators because it is not driven by external motivation. It's an intrinsic motivation. I can paint, I can draw, but if the teacher says, today we're going to draw, a flower, but I don't want to draw a flower. I can't draw a flower. I don't want to draw a flower. And it's seen as defiance, but it is almost like I can't, I just have to avoid whatever this demand is right now. So often what we do is we disguise demands. And disguise demands is we'll say things like, it's not you, we are going to draw a flower, everyone. Or I bet, I am going to draw the fastest flower here, or I bet you can't do this. Oh, if we keep this as, if I ask everyone, what is a favorite flower? What is your favorite flower? Oh, I'm sure it's going to be a little tricky for you. And things like it has to be intrinsically motivated. And that's how we work with demand avoidance, children who present with demand avoidance profile. Now we come to meltdowns, burnout, and shutdown. So we need to understand the difference between tantrums and meltdowns. Again, when we talk about Dr. Dan Siegel, if you've all read the book, The Whole Brain Child, which is such a beautiful book, and he talks about the upstairs brain or your prefrontal and your downstairs brain or your the amygdala, right? Tantrums are upstairs brain. I want to play a video game right now, and mom is saying, you can't have the phone. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw a tantrum. This is really annoying. And the child will watch the parent, but it's very cognitively driven. A meltdown, on the other hand, as I have said, if I'm masking, if I'm camouflaging, if I'm trying to kind of that overwhelm that gets to you, the sensory overwhelm. And usually parents will say, if we go to a mall, if you go to a shopping center, my child sometimes will have a meltdown. And the meltdown is not cognitively driven. It's more sensorily driven. So when I talked about the handy model, brain model, I flipped the lid. Now the prefrontal is offline. So any kind of rewards, any kind of consequences is not going to help to bring this prefrontal to come to meet your amygdala. It's not going to come online. Because I am now beyond reason here, my amygdala just needs to get it out. I have so much energy now, I just need to explode. So a meltdown is something that you'll find that it takes a while, and once the meltdown is gone, it takes a bit of recovery phase and the person feels better. So meltdowns are overwhelm, a sense of when the demands have exceeded my capacity to cope. And like I said, I've drawn this picture I found is so beautifully explains this battery. We're all running on this battery, When our phone is almost at 1%, we're running around to find the charger. We get so stressed about it. And but internally as well, we have this battery system. And when that battery is really low, we tend to have this explosion meltdown. So I am going to stop share and I'm going to share some videos again. Um, and this video is to understand meltdowns.
A student's anxiety is not relieved during the rumbling stage, he or she will likely enter the rage or meltdown stage. Here, the student may lose control, acting impulsively, emotionally, and sometimes explosively. At this point, behaviors range from outwardly physical, hitting, kicking, screaming, and destroying property, to internal, such as withdrawal.
What a meltdown really boils down to, it's when you're hijacked by your own emotions. You're basically you have no control. You have completely snapped. And depending on the individual, it can range from I'm just going to scream and cry and run out of the room to I'm going to throw tables.
So, first rule.
Stick with your group.
Lisa's son, Paul, has meltdowns that vary in appearance.
Meltdowns look like very different things depending on where you are for Paul, or depending on where Paul is at school. Even though he's a really happy, nice guy, the meltdowns will not look the same. And people who have never seen one will be surprised at how violent he can become.
When a meltdown occurs, teachers need to know what to do, what supports are in place, and be ready to act.
Just play it here. Yeah, I'm going to play the second video now.
He'll start to fidget. He'll start to rock. He'll start to look around, and then he'll start to move. He might even get up out of his chair.
He starts tensing up and stressing and having tics.
If unrecognized, these escalating stressors can lead to sudden and challenging behaviors. The most severe forms are commonly called meltdowns.
Meltdowns can be unbelievable, right? They can be about as violent as you can imagine from an individual who is just not violent.
Okay, stop it. You're not allowed to do that, teacher. He's using his phone. And
Here's the kid sitting at his desk, doing his work, and you walk over and you straighten his pencil on his desk, and that's it. He jumps up, he throws his desk, he may start hitting himself. It can range from that severe to screaming.
At school, a meltdown could look like banging on a desk. It could look like screaming at a teacher. It can look like a really weird face.
He was yelling. It took 2 adults to help him get out of the classroom and go to the vice principal's office and try to get him to calm down.
For students with autism, meltdowns occur when a situation, a task, or unforeseen stimuli overwhelms their ability to control their anxiety. And for many, it starts with being unaware of their feelings and emotions.
Sorry, everyone. I keep stopping and starting. So I apologize. So going back to my presentation, but as you can see, when I talk about, meltdown, this is what we need to consider, is that we are trying to now find a pattern of yellow zone behaviors and red zone behaviors. And I'm going to talk about this in my second presentation, which is in 2 weeks' time, and really managing the meltdowns. But it's recognizing the difference between tantrums and meltdowns. And sometimes you have to just ride it out. It's like a wave. It has to come through and it has to pass. But of course, ensuring that the child is safe and you're safe. But at that time, the best thing is not to go into this verbal diarrhea that parents often do when they're trying to manage a child's behavior. So the second part is, which I talk about, is burnout. And the burnout is obviously related to, and someone rightly said in the chat box that boys do tend to externalize more, girls tend to internalize more. So there are some boys who do mask and who do camouflage. And that burnout starts to happen when demands exceed capacity. So you can see that sometimes when autistic individuals are employed, but sometimes it becomes too much, managing the boss's expectation, doing the work, executive functioning, sensory overload, trying to learn something. And yet this can slowly take a toll and that exhaustion can happen. And sometimes that exhaustion happens to the point that there can be shut down. And this is that dorsal vagal activation where there is nothing. Shut down, but usually in burnout can be, it's not good. I mean, and we know that in camouflaging, I missed one point that is higher. They have seen that higher camouflaging is related to higher suicidality rates. So it is taxing. And I think recognizing this becomes very important. So listen to the client when they come in, don't just not at face value, but really going, what is really happening for this person? How much is anxiety, or how much is the autism really, putting this pressure, this self-pressure, and how can we support this person better? So I'm going to show, this is something that I want to talk about. This is the last 2 slides, I promise. But autism and attachment. Now, when I talk about attachment, you have to understand that attachment, there is a in psychiatry, there is this understanding reactive attachment and disinhibited social engagement disorder. But there is also attachment styles such as insecure attachment, disorganized attachment, the parenting or developmental attachment. And now they've started putting everything under this umbrella term called attachment difficulties. It's much easier, but it's very difficult to tease out attachment and autism sometimes. And I found that this is where in diagnostic assessments, I was getting quite, I didn't know. So there is this Coventry grid. I don't know if you've all seen it. It's not an evidence-based grid, but it was created by some professionals from CAMS in England. And it's a really nice resource. There is also an article which talks about differentiating attachment difficulties from autism spectrum and attention, ADHD. And we understand that even they talk about, they interviewed qualitative interviews of professionals, and many professionals use the Coventry grid, but they said, don't just use it on your own. Make sure that you use the Coventry grid along with the ADIR or ATOS, do some autism screening as well. So I'll just quickly go through the Coventry grid with you all. Just 1 moment. So the Coventry grid is an attempt to summarize differences between autism and attachment difficulties. And if you go through the grid, there are different sections, and they go through different, say for example, flexibility in thought and behavior. What is this subtle differences that you may see between attachment and autism? So for example, repetitive use of language, repetition of favored words, but in attachment, it may develop rituals for anxiety-provoking situations. Children's repetitive seems to be that of a younger child, so there's more regressed behavior, and so on and so forth. I know I'm wary of the time, but then there is difference between play behaviors, there is difference between social interaction, mind reading, theory of mind, problems differentiating fact and fiction, pragmatic language problem. So it's a really beautiful grid, and it's free. It's a free resource. So I would recommend that everyone have a look at it. But also in that, when I talked about camouflaging, I forgot, I don't know where that went in my slide, but there is also a slide on understanding that there is a QCAT, which is a questionnaire on camouflaging, and the link is in the slides. And if it's not, I'll send it, but it's free as well. So this was the link, the NovoPsych, the social CAT-Q, camouflaging autistic traits questionnaire. Again, it's a free resource, so please have a look at it. And finally, I like to, talk about this. There's another article that I found, and this is a really good article as well. So please have a read. And finally, I think coming back to that humanistic approach as psychologists is really important. And Carl Rogers really talked about that experience is for me the highest authority, the touchstone of validating my own experience. So it is about recognizing that the other person's experience is theirs alone, but trying to develop that client-centered approach, that unconditional positive regard, and helping the client reach their strength potential. I think that should be important. These are some really good books. This is Tony's book, The Complete Guide. Remember that we used to have Asperger's syndrome there, but it's one of the best books. From childhood to adulthood to relationships, everything is there in this book, and the way he talks is the way he writes. This is a book by Barb Cook and Michelle Garnett. Barb Cook was my colleague, Michelle Garnett is my supervisor, and they've written Spectrum Women, again, a very beautiful book. To understand PDA, this is a book by Jessica. Any book that you want to read on autism, go on Jessica Kingsley Publishers. They really have the best books. There is also a book on autism, learning disability, autism spectrum, Tourette's, anxiety, and more, and executive functioning. And then to teach children, this is a really lovely book. All cats are on the autism spectrum, all dogs have ADHD, and all birds have anxiety, and kids really love it. It's very sweetly described. So just the difference, just a reflection between acceptance and awareness. I couldn't find a slide, the strength-based slide, but what Tony and Caraway talked about was that autism needs to be just not seen as, you have to see it as talents, you have to see it as strengths, great visual thinkers, great memory for things that they're interested in, hyper-focused, determined, not negatively, but how can you translate the same language in DSM-5 into a more positive language? But also one of the most important things to understand is potential. What is my child's potential here? What can my child achieve? There is this potential to learn the social rules of neurotypical world. There is a potential to kind of reduce the social confusion by working on my strengths. If I am struggling to communicate emotions, but if my strength is that I'm really good with numbers and maths, then I can talk about my emotions through numbers, and I will talk about it next time. But I can just say, I'm feeling 10 upset right now. And that is so much better than saying, I don't know what I'm feeling in number 10. What is that word? So we can use strengths. If there is that engineering brain, if there is a child who comes into a clinic and is constantly, touching, flicking the switch up and down, instead of saying, oh, do I have to do an intellectual assessment here? But think about it as curiosity. Is the child curious? The child is trying to figure out, if I turn on the switch, the light is turning on, and that's really lovely. So it is about understanding what are the positives, what are the strengths in autism, and kind of, working on the difficulties and helping them understand their own strengths. That becomes very important in management. So post-reflection, very quickly, acceptance versus awareness. What is your understanding of these terms? Do you think it has changed? Gender difference is autism. Perhaps now that you heard this, you might think of some of your clients and you might think, oh yeah, I have noticed, these differences, but I hadn't really put it down. Understanding difference between meltdowns and tantrums, how does the management differ, and anxiety and the role it plays in autism presentation. So I hope this has, shed some light and has been helpful. So thank you, everyone. And sorry for all the stop
Thank you.
share.
Thank you so much, Radhika. There are many congratulations for you in the chat box.
Thank you.
Over to Chairperson for the initial remarks and any suggestions, any sharing of his experiences.
Thank you, Dr. Radhika. It was a very lucid presentation, and I can see the efforts you have put to make the presentation very interesting, using the videos, asking a very valid, thought-provoking questions in the beginning, again, and the end, to conclude, to point out very important questions, the way we see the autism, the need to change the perspective, and also to challenge the conventional thinking of autism. My favorite point especially was when you are talking about the meltdowns and tantrums. Usually, we see generally when we talk about this, we use the same word simultaneously, like instead of each other. Yeah. So this is very important that you highlighted. It is a very good learning lesson. And one more interesting thing is that the difference between girls and boys, which is, yes, in our clinic, we find the same thing, especially in adolescents. The girls, they don't behave same like boys. They're introverted. They don't, they in fact camouflage a lot of ways. They try to fit in. They want to fit in, and they feel very bad when they don't. So you don't, boys are a little different. They try to fit in, and then they don't, they then show tantrums, and then they don't try, they don't put a lot of efforts. And very interesting thing in my clinic these days, especially this last 2 years, I'm finding the number of cases of autism in girls having autism are raised almost to equal, 2:1 or 1:1. It's very strange that the ratio is reversed. Yeah, so a lot to do with the current patterns of screen use and lack of stimulation since post-pandemic. That has affected both the genders. So with this, I want the discussion to roll, and I want more and more questions and a lot of praises for your presentation, and yeah, all of them. Please,
thank you so
over
much.
to you. Yes.
Thank you. There is a question in the chat box. Is it possible to apply a strength-based approach in ASD kids with moderate to severe intellectual developmental disorder?
Yes, absolutely. And I still use it. And I think, one of the things that we do, especially in my workshops that I run, it is a strength-based approach. And we try and find out what are those things that the child enjoys, what are the child's strengths, and then working on that, leading on that, supporting the child in that. It doesn't have to be, maybe sometimes it can just be, what is the purpose? But if the child loves animals, then you work with animals. Maybe you do an art around animals, you do a craft around animals, you might do a little excursion on animals, you might go and feed pets and things like that. But you can definitely use a strength-based approach. And I think the more you work on strengths, you're kind of starting to unlock those potentials. But before you work on strengths, you have to, remembering that polyvagal understanding, you have to create a sense of safety. They have to trust you. And you have to, and how do you, polyvagal is how do you bring in the trust? My nervous system is talking to your nervous system. So by the voice you use, the guidance that you give, and in a very calm way, you kind of help the child in such a way that the child now feels, yes, I'm in a safe environment. When the anxiety is less, you will start to discover the strengths coming up more. So definitely, I would.
Okay. So Sharda wants to ask, at what age camouflage behavior can be identified, and can it be used as a strength?
What age?
At what age the camouflage behavior can be identified?
Camouflaging behavior, usually when they are younger, it's more something that parents will observe. And I remember when I was in Nagpur once and I was giving this talk, and one of the fathers said to me, my daughter camouflages. She's just 7 years old, but we have seen her. And what she does is she puts on a persona of a favorite Indian actress of that time. She dresses up like her, and she's only 7, but she does it and she changes her voice. So camouflaging is something that parents will pick up very quickly. Initially, they may say, oh, मतलब दूसरों की तरह behave, जैसे उनके जो their expression, they'll copy the expressions. But as in your clinic as well, you can notice some camouflaging, but usually in adolescents and in when they're adults, if you ask them, they will themselves identify. And the QCARO is one really lovely questionnaire to kind of talk about camouflaging with the, and have this, like do the questionnaire with them when there's a more sense of more awareness of what's happening for them.
Okay, and her follow-up question is, can it be used as a strength?
Camouflaging is used as a strength, and many of the autistic individuals who use camouflaging will then now become fine actors because they're masking their difficulties so well. But I think it comes as a cost. So I wouldn't use it as a strength. Rather, I would say to them, who is, when we do therapy, when we are doing management, we ask them, who are you? What is it? What are your strengths? What do you identify? Who do you want to be? That authentic person. And it's almost like a pizza slice that yes, you're copying someone, but at what cost? You're losing who you are. And I think I wouldn't use it as a strength. In fact, you need to kind of start to say, this is where advocacy comes in. I don't need to camouflage, but I can say, I'm a person, I'm an autistic person, and these are some of the things that I find challenging. So I just want to let you know.
Okay, a very interesting question by Jia. Can an autistic child opt for science stream, oblique medical in class 11th?
I think yes, if you feel that they have got the I don't think that you should stop an autistic person. If they really want to do it, they will do it if they're determined. The only thing is handling the executive functioning, the pressure, the overload. So often we'll say to families and making sure that you talk, if they are open to it, of sharing their diagnosis, then, talking to whoever their supervisor is, that sometimes they may require a mental health day. Sometimes they may require you to kind of maybe send the notes beforehand so that they can read it. Sometimes they may need if they're struggling, can they come to you later on and just clarify? But understanding and talking with that autistic child is, are you struggling right now? Is it becoming too much? We need to work on that. How do you communicate your emotions? Because often they will hold back and they may not show their emotions and they may just try to be the best student ever, but at a cost. So I think having that, that very frank discussion, and I think with autistic individuals, if you have frank discussions, they'll never lie. They'll tell you honestly what they're feeling, but it's about opening that conversation.
Okay, Malini wants to know once again, difference between awareness and acceptance.
Okay, so Malini, acceptance, awareness is, I understand, I recognize autism. I understand the symptoms and core behaviors that go with autism. If someone says, I'm autistic, you're like, oh, okay. But you don't do anything. You don't try and understand what is going on for them. What are their experiences? What can I do to gain more understanding from you so that I can bring about, it's hard work in acceptance to bring about that change, to bring inclusion, whether it's advocacy in a workplace. And this collective approach needs to happen. Don't work in isolation. If you're at your clinic, work with the allied health professional. There are so many schools that cater to autistic individuals in India now. And maybe it is about, reaching out to different schools, trying to form a collective support system for the autistic individuals.
Okay. Okay, RJ wants to ask, an autistic child in class 9th is flourishing in a Gurukul school. Would putting him in a regular school unsettle his progress?
This is a tricky question for me to answer because I need to know many more details. Like, what is the child? What is the school? How is the school? So I can't answer that question, but what I can say is if the child is enjoying Gurukul and if it is strength-based and potential-based and they are willing to take him, is going to help him reach his goals that he set, then why not? Mainstreaming, of course, if you feel in mainstreaming, but it has to be perhaps more a gradual mainstreaming, or it has to be that the mainstream really understands your child. The mainstream needs to work with the child, with the family, rather than saying, because it's transitioning, isn't it? I'm going into this socially demanding, sensory demanding world, and I have to cope with all that, and I have to transition between different classrooms, and I have to open my books on executive functioning. So I really, if the school is very supportive and they understand it, it's not isolating, but including the child. Then I think it's having that frank conversations with the school, get a feeling of the school and how much they understand, whether they see it as a deficit model, whether they see, they wear this lens that we know that one person on the autism spectrum is one person on the autism spectrum. You just met one. They're all different. So making sure that they have a good understanding.
Okay, we are running out of time. Shazia wants to ask, can you explain demand avoidance once again?
So demand avoidance is basically, it is avoidance of, so remember, fight, flight, sympathetic nervous system, arousal. So avoidance, that is a flight. I avoid every demand that is put on me, even though I can do those behaviors, be it brushing my teeth, wearing my shoes, combing my hair, anything that is even asked is a simple thing like, can you pass me the pen, can be seen as a demand. No. And it's not opposition defined, it's not cognitively, I don't want to do it. It's more anxiety driven because I am just not sure. I'm so crippled with anxiety right now. Anxiety is controlling everything, that even a little anything is seen as demand, and the demand kind of stops me from doing the task or following through the task. And so what happens is it's more intrinsically governed rather than extrinsic motivation will not work. And you can understand the difference between ODD and is that, in demand, if you start to work with a child and you use a lot of behavioral charts and everything, it's not going to work. And parents like, it's just not working. We've tried everything. And demand avoidance is more intrinsically. I bet you won't know who is Harry Potter's favorite best friend. Oh, I know it. Oh, really? Which chapter is it? I don't think I've seen it. You pretend dumb, another child will show you. So it's very intrinsically motivated. So that's the difference.
Okay. Dr. Jay wants to ask, are we talking more about high functioning autism? How to manage children with more severe behavior issues?
So again, we are talking about, I guess I'm trying to talk about in general, and it's not high functioning, low functioning, but it's more strengths and more difficulties and which areas. And again, I'm not talking about management here, but really understanding these maybe camouflaging and masking might
Yeah,
not
I think we have future issues on future editions on management, so we can include it there.
Yes.
One last question. Any relationship between autism and gender dysphoria?
Yes, there is. I don't have details right now, so maybe next time I can present a little, but there definitely is.
Sure.
Yes.
I think we're already over short time. So I'll try to bring in the chairpersons, and after that, Tufan Bari sir. Dr. Ravikant, any final comments from you?
It was an excellent presentation. It opened our minds to understand the new perspective that you're making. And this more humanistic perspective. Understand. So maybe one quote that stop labeling. I mean, yes, the description is done, but now start understanding the child beyond the symptoms and try to understand the child. Then you can develop a better strategies. I really understand and I really appreciate this whole presentation done by you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Amrit, I think we just got you. Thank you, Ravikant. Amrit, do we have you?
Yeah, I'm there. No, Radhika, first of all, thank you so much. No,
Oh,
using
thank
2 alarm
you.
clocks to help us. That was brilliant.
Executive function.
So the only one advice to you: don't be so apologetic about everything. Don't have to tell sorry, sorry, sorry. Huh.
Yeah. I
So
have
yeah,
to
the
get better
technical
with
problems.
technology.
So thank you again. I was, the sessions got late. I was, I was in another session. So sorry, I could not join. But I put this and I was hearing you totally.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
thank you for a
Really
wonderful
appreciate it.
presentation.
Thank
And
you.
it
Thank
was
you.
great. And we had a huge turnover, even though we are having a big conference, World Psychiatric Association Congress here. A lot of our people are here
Wow.
doing sessions. All we had maybe 250, 260 logins. That was great. Peak of more than 200. I think thank you so much. We'll call you again. Thank you, Alim,
Thank
for
you.
holding it together. Thank you to our
Thank you. Thank you.
chairpersons.
Amrit, I
Good
think
night.
yeah, good night to you. Tofan sir, any comments from your side?
Or it's a wonderful presentation, and
Oh,
no
thank
comment
you.
this time. I don't want to come in the way of her sleep. Have a good sleep,
Thank
have
you.
good
Thank you.
dreams, and
Thank you.
all of us are in WP. It is a crowded conference, but I was with you all
Thank you for
throughout.
coming.
But wonderful
Thank you so
presentation.
much.
Looking forward for the next time. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Please carry on with the conference. Radhika, if you can put your email ID, many people are asking for your contact. So,
Sure.
yeah, once again, thanks, Chairperson, Dr. Ravi Khan. So nice to have you here. All the audience that are here. Radhika for burning the midnight oil, literally. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you. So
This
nice.
session
Yeah.
was mostly coordinated by Rucha and Sharda. So a very a big thanks to them. Thanks to our technical team, Torrent, all the audience that are there with us. We had more than 200 people. So guys, we take a break now, and you can contact Radhika. Her email is there. So we'll call her again also. Anna?
Thank you. I'll see you in
So
2 weeks with
good night.
management.
Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Ending the meeting now.